Ruby? So I'm going to attempt to teach her an intermediate and a terminal bridge to get a sit. And who knows, if I'm lucky, I might even be able to move around a little bit while she's doing it.
I don't think you need to use that. She just said
Yeah, she's all done. Yes. 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 No, I don't have to go to the bathroom. Yes. 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 No. So this is a dog that doesn't know the SIT command yet, so I'm not going to just say it to her. Yes. Yes. And she doesn't know terminal bridge very well, but we'll work with that. Yes. 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 Oops. Okay. Yes. Exit, six, 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 yes. Exit, six, 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 yes. Exit, six, 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 yes. Exit. So I'll see if she changes that on her own. I don't really expect it. And I'll help her to do something else. Yes. So right now I'm rewarding her for getting out of the down, because if she goes from a sit to a down, in order to get back to a sit, she has to get out of the down. So it's not that what she's doing is perfect. So she was, yes. X six 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 six. Yes. See, she started squat down. X six six six. Yes. X six 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 six. Yes. X six 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 six. Yes. X six 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 six. Yes. Oops. Yes. X six six. Yes. Yes. X six 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 six, yes. X six 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 six, yes. Oops. Chuck that up, yes. X six 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 six, yes. X six 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 six, yes. X six 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 six, yes. X six 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 six, yes. Release. Yeah. Okay. So it's pretty good for a puppy that's just learning this, and that the main frustration that her owner has is that she's too hectic and kind of all over the place. One of the things, if you notice, is I'm using what we call a string of rewards. So just one piece of food after another in the beginning. And I look like I need to go to the bathroom or I have Parkinson's. I'm moving around a little bit the whole time that I'm doing that. What classically happens when people are teaching a dog to reward, whether they're using, teaching a dog to sit, whether they're using rewards or force, is that they do it under very sterile conditions in the beginning. And they do that for some period of time, usually with the idea that the dog has to be able to just sit long enough before they start adding in other things. So maybe, long enough might be 10 seconds, it might be 30 seconds, it might be a minute, depending on, the training. But they do that in a very sterile way first, and then they start introducing distractions. The other thing that happens, and this is a big problem with reward-based training, is they get one sit, and if they're a clicker trainer, they click, and the click means you're going to get rewarded, but also you're done sitting. So the dog learns that what's really exciting about sitting is going into the sit, because that provokes the response from the trainer, and getting out of the sit, because that's paired with the click, and plus it's free. Right? What I want to do is I want her to actually like sitting and start to think that sitting is a tool to control me. That she can force me into the next terminal bridge, and there'll be another and another. So, first thing is, when we think about having a reward to behavior ratio of 1 to 1, you do one sit, I give you one piece of food. In the beginning, when you're just trying to get a sit, that's a pretty good deal for the dog. You know, boom, I sit, yeah, I get food. Yeah. But as the dog gets better at sitting, they get less rewarded, because now they have to sit longer to get the one reward. And what happens at the end of the sit? They get released.
Yeah.
And of course that's true whether you're using rewards or force, doesn't matter. So now for the dog, the food payoff is not that big. It's still only $1. But I have to do more and more work to get it. And so now the release, which is part of the reward sequence, becomes more and more meaningful to the dog. That becomes the bigger payoff. And so now you're trying to teach the dog to sit or down or stand or whatever the hell you're trying to teach the dog to do. And the two most exciting parts of it for the dog are when they first do the behavior and when they're done. The meat of the sandwich is not that good to the dog. It's like, oh, I'm sitting here and I'm doing this. Now, if you're using force, again, don't get hung up on the word force, it's just the other option. You're either inducing the dog into the behavior or you're forcing the dog into the behavior. Well, if you're using force, then the action itself is not that interesting to the dog. There's nothing about the sit or the down that is great, good in any way. It doesn't have to be terrible, but the dog can go, hey, I got this great idea, I think I'll lay down for 30 seconds or whatever. So the dog may not be hating it, but there's nothing that attracts the dog to it. This is, hey, I really want to do that. So in reward-based training, the dog wants to do whatever it's going to take to get the reward. But in most reward-based training, the dog doesn't actually learn to like the behavior. They like the terminal bridge and release. By using a string of rewards that happen in the behavior, the dog actually learns to like the behavior. Very good. So if you notice, I'm turning my body, but I'm using the Bob Bailey rule to reward her. So I'm not just giving her food for staying in the sit. The food is coming in the exact same place in front of her, no matter how I turn. You missed that one? Yes. There we go. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. See how she up the head up? X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. Release. Good. So the only part of this behavior that I force is the release. Why do I force the release?
You want to pick
What's that? Why teach it with force? Why not just like throw some food on the ground or something and tell her release? Because anything I will do with a reward is something that she should not release to. So if I want to teach the dog to stay in a down, what I want to get to is where I can have her sit, X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, oops, 6, yes. So this food on the ground should be a challenge stimulus. She should get out of this to go get it, yes. Yes. But when I make her get out of it, it will be there as a reward. X6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, yes. X6, 6, yes. see your head pop up when I interrupt with you to bridge. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6. Yes. Release. Now she can go get that food. Anything you do to induce the release with a reward is something the dog actually should not release to. So when I want her to release, I make her move. It'll just happen. But the rewards are already there because I already threw those as challenges to her good behavior. So now she knows that they're there. She would like them. But very much like what I did with Neil, she's getting paid a lot more for being in the sit than she would ever get for going to that food. In the beginning, she wouldn't know that. She'd go for the food in a heartbeat if I dropped it right in front of her. But what I'm doing is I'm initially throwing the food far enough away that it's outside of the leash. I already taught her before I did this the boundary of the leash. If you notice, she just went out there and stopped and turned around. There's 2 pieces of food just a little bit further away on the ground. She knows they're there, but she didn't go to them because I've already taught her there's a boundary to this leash. So when I took a challenge piece and threw it out there, she doesn't really think she can go get it. She sees it, and initially she's like, "Ooh, should I go get that?" But before she could actually get up and go get it, I'm saying yes and giving her another piece. It was very much like what I was doing with Neil, with giving him the money. She's like, "Okay, so I can get paid for just being here?" Yes. And my equivalent of giving Neil the $50 bill is how fast I'm giving her the food. Each piece of food is only worth so much. But when she expects, boom, it's going to come, it starts to feel more like $50 to her. So she's like, well, why would I go over there to get $1? I can stay here and make money all day long. Right? Now, once I teach that idea, just like I stopped using $50 with Neil, I don't have to keep using $50 with her. Let's give me a second. Maybe that looks good, doesn't it? Maybe that looks interesting. What's that? Yes. Good. So if she just checks it out, then I can add it, fine. No correction, just yes for checking it out. All right, let's see if we can do this with a down. That was ridiculous. Good. No idea was that good, did you, honey?
Oh my
We got that on video, right?
Oh yeah.
She did the same thing with the sit. You're like, we're going to do
Yeah,
the
I know,
sit.
right?
And she sat.
She might have a language program installed. Yes.
I think Marissa got her fully loaded, you know?
Yeah.
Right? Yes. 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 Now she's trying to take the food directly from my hand, not waiting until I put it on the ground. So I'll fix that in a little bit, hopefully. Yes. 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 X 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6. Yes. X 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. I shouldn't cheat and do this with more calls. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. X 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 6 yes. Release. Okay. What do you think is the main thing that's making her remain in the down while I'm waving my hand around and everything else? Well, food's in my hand. Why isn't she chasing my hand? Because I was feeding her in the same place every time. So that's the Bob Bailey rule. She's, however interested she is in the food, by nature she would tend to go where the food is. So So the food's in my hand and I'm doing this stuff and I'm throwing food out there and everything. But I've created an expectation for her that the only food she's ever actually going to get is the food that's in the reward place, wherever that reward place might be at the time. So when I was doing the sit, it was where her face is when she's sitting. And in fact, at one point she moved this way, and I started internally bridging and putting the food back where her face had been previously. And she actually moved a little bit over that way. But when she tried to get the food directly out of my hand, I just didn't give it to her. When she thought about running off to get the food, she just doesn't get it. She gets food back where she is. So the two things that are really creating the behavior in the beginning is the rapid repetition of the reward. So there's not really much reason to go somewhere else to get the yes. To go somewhere else to get the reward. It's going to come here. And then the placement of the reward. So the reward is repeatedly going to the same place. And really quickly you can see she's resistant to being drawn out of it. And that's exactly what I mean about why I force her into the release. Because pretty quickly, no matter what I would try to do reward-wise to get her to release, she wouldn't do it. And she shouldn't. But I'll teach her that when I say the word release, then I'm going to make her move, and there's already rewards there and she can get it. So, unlike typical reward-based training, where the most exciting part for the dog is the release, in this case, the release isn't that exciting to the dog. She likes it, she'll do it, and it'll become very reliable. It's just not like, oh boy, can I get released now? Can I get released? Right? And the payment is congruent to the amount of work that she's doing. So in other words, if I want a longer sit in the beginning, she gets more food. She doesn't all of a sudden have to do a longer sit and get less food, like per second that she's sitting. So that stays the same. So it makes it really, really easy for the dog. When I add the intermediate bridge gives me another element of control. So it may not have been obvious to everyone. Some of you might not have been looking when it happened, or you might just not recognize it. But a couple of times I interrupted the intermediate bridge, mostly in the sit, because she put her head down. And it wasn't really that I needed her to sit with her head up. It was that I thought her putting her head down was part of the continuum of bringing her butt off of the ground and going somewhere. So I interrupted the intermediate bridge, and at least twice that I can recall when I did that, she snapped her head back up. So she's putting her head down. Oh, wait a minute. This is a really classic response, a little bit overblown because it's a border collie, just to be clear. I mean, but a classic response with a dog that has had no training with the intermediate bridge. That's why it's important you use that fast single sound, because the interruption of it is attention getting. And she goes, huh? What just happened? That's repairing the behavior, and I say yes.